Honestly, I go home and tell my husband about let me just tell you what we talked about in a meeting today. And he's like, how do you get away with that? The content of our meetings is definitely not something I've ever experienced with any other brand.
I mean, none of us either from the client side. Like every time someone joins the account, I'm like, you will say things to this client that you would never in a million years think about saying to anyone else. And it's
also,
okay.
Don't say it to any other client.
Right. Okay, welcome to another episode of the Outsmart podcast. For our listeners, we are live in our San Diego office. Well, live. This won't be live, but we are live together in our San Diego office. And I am joined by Stephanie Pruce of Team Lewis, who heads up our San Diego office and our consumer PR practice. And she is standing in for my co-host Rex Petrel today.
I'm coming for your job, Rex.
Yeah, Rex, watch it. So Steph has very kindly brought Emily from one of our longstanding partners, Astroglide, and Emily heads up social media and content at Astroglide, and we are so excited to talk to you today. I'm so glad that we scared you with all of our lights and cameras.
Absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, I sold Emily on this by telling her how laid back and relaxed we were and how easy this would be, and she showed up today and we've got all the lights and cameras. But still very relaxed, we're casual, no big deal. Welcome to Outsmart.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here and also excited that I brushed my hair today because I did not know it was going to be on camera. But yeah, happy to be here. Happy to chat.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your work at Astroglide? And obviously, Steph, you know Emily well, right? You guys have worked together for years. So feel free to help us steer in any direction. But
Sounds
yeah, why
good.
don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I've been with Biofilm, who is the manufacturer of Astroglide. We make a few other products as well for a few years now, and I head up social media and digital content and manage our influencer and brand ambassador programs.
She makes it sound like it's a couple of things when really it's like a million things.
Yeah, I'm like, I think I heard about 5 different jobs
exactly.
in that description.
Yeah, that was sort of scratching the surface. I do wear a lot of hats, but it's a super fun brand, as you can imagine, to work with.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Steph, you can attest to this. We have these daily task force calls at Team Lewis, and it's just kind of a global gathering of our executive team. And we'll kind of, dig deep into some of the problems we're trying to solve with different clients. And every time Astroglide is up, Emily, I kid you not, there are certain people who we just have to say, you cannot join because you have too much fun.
And also they'll just giggle the whole time because they can't keep straight faces with the things that we talk about.
Honestly, I go home and tell my husband about let me just tell you what we talked about in a meeting today. And he's like, how do you get away with that? And I'm like, it's amazing. We have a great group of people, but it is, the content of our meetings is definitely not something I've ever experienced with any other brand.
I mean, none of us either from the client side. Like every time someone joins the account, I'm like, you will say things to this client that you would never in a million years think about saying to anyone else. And it's
also,
okay.
Don't say it to any other client.
Right. Yeah. There's a filter you remove.
Yes.
Yeah. Or I feel like IT probably had to do some serious.
Yes, we have special privileges. We are not looking at inappropriate things just for fun. It is actually work.
Yes. It's also a skill set, I think, to be able to turn on the we're having very inappropriate conversations for a purpose, and then turn it off in a setting at work where you're like, I probably shouldn't have this conversation with my employee. It's a whole HR fun balance. So
For sure. Well, I remember when we started working with you all and some of the nuances that you come across and some of the barriers to entry with different ad platforms and what we can and can't talk about. And talk to us a little bit about how you kind of see around those and still, find a way to creatively reach your audiences.
it's really tricky. I mean, I came from a background of food and beverage, and there was restrictions on, I did a lot with wine, so the alcohol has restrictions on different channels, but this is a whole new level because we are a personal lubricant. So it's a sexual health product that a lot of people associate with pleasure, but we're also a medical device that's regulated by the FDA. So we've got restrictions on social platforms that we can't advertise. And then we're restricted by the FDA in terms of what claims we can actually make. So there's a ton of review that goes into any content that goes out, more so than any brand I've ever worked with, where it's like, from a regulatory perspective, what are we able to say? And then will TikTok take this down? Will Instagram take this down? So there's definitely a very calculated approach in the way we message our products.
And some of it is a little bit trial and error too on how consumers will react to things as well. Like, we might think something's great and then it falls flat, like our little April Fool's Day, stunt that we did on social this year. We were laughing. It was lube for dogs, and we couldn't think of anything funnier. And we ended up getting some backlash on Twitter, mostly from consumers, because they were like, is this bestiality? Are you recommending that we actually have sex with our animals? It's
hard when you're in the bubble of like, sometimes you're too close to it, where we're like, this is hilarious. Of course people are gonna know that this is a joke. Lube for dogs, it's funny. And then you're like, oh wait, the people on social media are insane, and they're gonna take it in like a really weird direction. So it's a challenge for sure.
Even beyond that, like even something that's just our day to day, right? When we changed our campaign and we took our ad videos to a different place on YouTube, and it was a little bit steamier than what had previously been used across our Astroglide advertising, and we got people that basically were like, we're not going to buy you anymore. Like, you went too far, which is very interesting, because the whole reason you're buying us is to use this product to have sex, and we're depicting people in steamy situations, and it was too far for them.
I think one of the things we learned from that, though, was it's one thing if you're a subscriber to our channels or you're following us on social media, you expect that content, but we've learned with our video ads that if they're too steamy and you get served an ad and you're like, I'm just going about my day, and then all of a sudden there's like a couple getting it on in the back of a car, you're like, I'm sorry, I haven't even had lunch yet and this is a lot. So like, you might be one of our key targets, but like, it really matters like where and when it's presented to you. So we've had to change, I think, some of our video creative strategy to be like, how can we make this empowering and sexy without like slapping people in the face with it when they're not really prepared for it.
That's really interesting. So really drawing a line between your organic and paid strategies. If someone is subscribing and they're here for that content and here for a reason, then you can kind of push the boundaries a little bit, versus like if you're targeting broader awareness and reaching different audiences, to your point, that the steamier content may turn someone off.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the people that come to our website and to our social channels are the ones that are like, I want sex tips, I have sexual health questions, but reaching a broader audience, which is really challenging for us with the advertising restrictions.
Right.
We have to like do a really delicate dance based on like the platform and the channel that we're trying to reach those people on.
Yeah, so we're a regulated industry on Facebook and Instagram, and we can't advertise at all. So what would normally be part of our day-to-day program for combining social and paid social, we don't have that. So all of the growth that we've had over the last 4 years when we've been working together has been organic grown, from doing things with ambassadors and influencers and literally just hoping that our content is relevant and fun for people, that they want to come and check us out. So that's been really challenging, because we see other brands like Trojan or even Viagra that are allowed to do paid advertising and we're not.
Yeah, there's a very frustrating sort of double standard in terms of...
It's a blurry line, it seems.
Well, it seems like if it's for men, if it's perceived as being for men, it's like condoms and erectile dysfunction medication, they can advertise. But like lube, even though we're a medical device, it's like, it's aligned with pleasure, which God forbid anyone have pleasure in anything and that we advertise that.
Right.
But I have seen actually in the last year that Meta has changed some policies where we can, they say you can advertise lubricant if it's for dryness or for like a medical purpose versus pleasure. But we are still having trouble getting past like the gatekeepers, because as I'm sure a lot of people who are listening know, the inconsistency applied with people reviewing those ads on those platforms, it's sort of all over the place. But yeah, we've had to get super strategic in the way that we try to reach people. We've done like sampling programs with like companies that like people will share our product. If they get the sample, they're going to share it on social. We have a ton of influencer partnerships. Yeah. We partner with like-minded brands that are also trying to grow their following and reach people who may also be interested in our product. And then we try to create really fun, informative, interesting content that'll reach the people that are looking for it. But it's definitely, it's like we get over one wall, there's another one. And it's just strictly because we're talking about like sex and having a good sex life, which really shouldn't be so taboo.
Which I also think is interesting in some of the rules that Meta's changed, because like something like dryness, yes, it's one of the factors of like reasons that you would use lube, but I also think it's one of the biggest misconceptions that we're always trying to combat, is that people think, oh, I don't need this because I can satisfy my partner in a way that they're naturally lubricated, right? And that's something that we've been trying to combat since Astroglide was formed, is that it's used for so many other areas to enhance your pleasure. So then that gets into a space too where it's only one of our message points that we want.
Right, no, that's a great point, because there is a stigma around using lubricant, both for men and women. It's like women are like, well, it feels like I have a problem if I need it. And our message is like, it makes everything feel better. Like it adds pleasure, it like encourages exploration, and those are all really good things for a healthy sex life. So just making it about like, well, you've passed a certain age and you're dry, or you're taking, people who take antidepressants or medication can have issues with dryness. Like that's like one small segment.
Nursing, it's a huge,
Girl, I hear
huge
you.
segment. Yeah, TMI, but like searching for after having my kid, and the doctor saying, okay, you're cleared, but you may want to use some sort of an aid. And I had no idea where to start. And it's a huge untapped audience, and it's something that like you don't even realize until you're in that position of, in that postpartum position live, and you're like, oh shit.
Like I would like to be able to connect with my partner, but doesn't feel great right now. And we've even found we do a lot of work with healthcare providers. So we have a whole sampling program for doctors and practitioners to hand out to their patients. And we do trade shows with doctors. And it's sort of surprising how many of them are like, how little they, like some of them know, like some physicians are super well informed about sexual health, but some of them are like, if you're menopausal, you need lube. Yep. And so there is like this education element in terms of your doctor, where it's like, hey, like there's a lot of benefits to using this.
I think that's been one of the biggest benefits of our program. So we partner with 4 ambassadors that are in either the medical space or the sexual health and wellness. So we have a urologist and an OBGYN and, just more of a sex therapist and
a sex researcher.
So, I mean, we leverage them for everything, because that also brings third-party credibility to us, right? We use that for our social, we use it for media relations, for any of our campaigns focused on holidays and things like that. We've curated a really great group of people that are super diverse, in their personal lives and in what they can provide to us, that helps with a lot of that.
Yeah, I think it's sort of the backbone of our content strategy too, is that they create a lot of content for us on a monthly basis, usually like a blog, that we then take that and break it into like tons of social posts, and we make videos from it. So it's like,
and they make videos.
They do. So we have some really great expertise in-house, but like our ambassadors, I think, contribute like the quality of the content for this brand, for the size of our brand. I'm very proud of it.
Yeah, well, and it just goes to show you don't need to have a multi-million-dollar ad budget. Yep. You don't need to be everywhere all the time. It's about knowing where your audiences are, having a really solid, grounded understanding of them, and it sounds like you all do, and then leveraging other avenues and other channels and using that ambassador or influencer network and slicing and dicing everything in a smart way. So you're really like getting the best bang for your buck, as it were, for all those different levers that you're pulling.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, from the media relations perspective, they've been paramount to our success on this program, because as you can imagine, there's only so many media that write about sexual, sex, sexual health and wellness. And then there's even fewer that, if we're not launching a new product, they're not doing lube roundups every week, right? So how can we get this brand?
Allure beauty.
Yeah, exactly. They're not doing a lot of awards that are, lube is relevant for. We have our first one coming up with Ask Men, but so we're able to leverage the ambassadors and their insight for 95% of our media coverage. So being able to submit them for HAROs and ProfNets and proactive pitching has just changed the game for us. And I will say, I think, maybe I'm being biased, but compared to competitors, that we win at media relations because we have these ambassadors to speak on such a variety of topics.
Absolutely. I feel like, we cover the lube and sex tips part is like this small slice of our content, but like it's like dating, relationships, health, and well-being, and so there's a huge lifestyle component. And I think our ambassadors really sort of cover all the bases of like complete sexual health and wellness, which I love.
I think that's the other thing too with this brand is our target audience is so wide.
Right. Yeah, it's a huge, and I was actually going to ask you, I know in our earlier intake conversations, we were talking about how I think you mentioned, Emily, that the sort of appetite for racier content a couple years ago was not there, and then you started kind of pushing the needle and seeing how audiences were responding and trying to speak to broader and different groups and really make it more a brand for everyone. So I'd love for you to talk to us a little bit about that.
You know, being in social media, things change so rapidly anyway, but the way I think culturally things are shifting in terms of sex positivity, it's like accelerating. So from the time I've been with Astroglide, which is honestly not even 3 years, what the conversations on social media around sex were limited, I think, in a little more niche, where people aren't willing to talk about like embarrassing sex stories or share like whatever sort of things that are happening in their personal lives and relationships. And I think the emergence of video platforms like TikTok, people are very like comfortable talking about delicate things, and it's been huge for us because it's trying to get people to engage on social media and like on a platform like Facebook when they're talking about sex and your like grandma is on Facebook, like that's not happening there, right? So it's like TikTok has been wonderful for us.
Yep. Unless we're in TikTok jail.
Which TikTok is also very challenging. They don't like, you can't like show a sex toy or really talk about sex as openly. You have to sort of know how to get around it, and we get some videos taken down that were like, we just showed Astroglide packaging from like 30 years ago. It was like a time lapse. Like, why did it doesn't, none of it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, trial and error a little bit.
Yeah, but I think one thing we've learned, and I feel like I may have lost the thread of the question, but one thing we've learned is that there are certain platforms where we can just kind of go nuts and be like the kind of people that we are sort of in the office and have the conversations we have that are really like funny and racy and risky. And that is absolutely Twitter. Like Twitter's such a fun place for us to have conversations. And we've learned like we can do that here. And on Facebook, it's like, we're definitely like more informative. Here's our product. Here's some information you might want. Like we know on Instagram, we have like a larger female following that is really looking for like useful, empowering information. And then on Twitter, it's just sort of
Twitter is amazing. I mean, even over the last couple of years, like, so we're in the midst of COVID, right? The ship gets stuck in the Suez Canal. We take that to our advantage, right? We put we slap an Astroglide logo on a tanker truck and just post, you know, we're on our way to help. You know, Bezos launches his rocket, which we all know, let's be honest, looked like a penis. Astroglide is on its way, right? Like, and I think even in the last like several months with Jonathan on your team joining, like the day-to-day chatter that goes on that he's been able to incorporate Astroglide into is beyond.
Well, this is the other thing, like speaking specifically to people who are running social media, like you have to have people on your team that you trust to make decisions in the moment, because I've worked with so many brands where it's like you go through this like really excruciating review and approval process, and social media like Twitter and TikTok don't really work that way. Like you need to be like in the moment responding and jumping on things. And like they're not always gonna be like a home run, but you have to have someone on your team that you're like, run with it, I trust you. Is it gonna like, how much damage is it gonna do? But it's like you have to be nimble and not slowed down by like this, every person needs to have eyes on this. Because sometimes everyone has eyes on it and it still flops. Lube for dogs.
Lube for dogs.
Oh my gosh.
But the best ones, and I mean, this goes back to like, you know, our IT team not regulating what we're, you know, looking at and stuff, because a couple of weeks ago, Tommy Lee just flat out posted a dick pic on all of his social platforms. I think it was taken off Facebook like right away, right? But it's still on Twitter. And our team came across it, flagged it in our group chat with Emily and them, and we were like, obviously we have to be commenting on this. And it just went like through the roof for that afternoon. And it was, I don't know, it's still one of my like, I just think about it randomly, like, one, he just posted it and he was like, here we are.
I can't get it out of my head. I'm like, what are you
Everyone
doing?
goes and Googles Tommy Lee dick pic after listening to this.
I'm like, it's 2 a.m, buddy. You need to go to sleep. This is a lot.
It was, but I mean, it was just one of those things on Twitter that like, you have to jump on this. Obviously, this is an Astroglide conversation that we need to be a part of.
And I think we've had situations where something interesting has come up and we've waited on approval from like somebody else, and then the moment it's like it's not going to happen, and that's okay.
I think the other thing is too, though, there are times where we go silent on social. I think a lot of that obviously happened with COVID, right? When everything was happening then with BLM, even when the Queen passed away, we went silent that afternoon, right? Like just being observant of what's happening in the U.S. and the world, and navigating. Do we need to pause content today? Do we need to pause content for an entire week? Like that's conversations that we have to be having in the moment too.
I think we learned a ton. I mean, I started a few months before COVID and we had this whole plan and everything was planned out like a month in advance and it was all buttoned up. And then COVID happened and we were like, oh my God, we have to change everything. Like we can't talk about, like nobody cares about the stuff we have planned. We have to join the conversation and figure out like how to entertain and inform people that are at home in a way that is relevant to our brand and isn't polarizing, which is like a freaking minefield at this point.
Especially when you've got 7 million different target audiences.
Right. So I think we became really nimble at when to join conversations and when to like, we're just gonna not say anything today. Or is this like, do we want to take a stand here? Or is this something that it's like, we don't have a place to speak in this space? And I think we've managed to do that. Like, we've evolved and we've gotten a lot better at it.
100%.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It sounds like too, really letting that audience behavior kind of dictate what your strategy is going to be. And to your point, being okay with being nimble, and sometimes shit happens and you need to just completely shift your strategy. And people aren't going to give a shit about what your plans were and what your moments in time were, and just being able to kind of change on a dime. And that's really important. And to your point, I love the point you made, Emily, about having someone on your team that you trust to make those decisions. And because the chain of command can completely dilute a good idea and can also take too long, and then that moment is gone.
Well, and a lot of times it's like sometimes, and I think I'm guilty of like, oh, should I do this? Should I not? I don't like, what if it, and sometimes you just have to be like, I'm going to go with my gut. And most of the time, the people in leadership behind us are like, do your job.
Yeah.
And, it's okay to take some risks. But I mean, social media is like a very scary place.
You never know what you're going to post. It's going to get...
Someone will troll you.
Yeah.
That
absolutely.
will happen.
I mean, one of the things I think we've learned with all of the sort of like political ups and downs over the past few years is that social media can be trolly, but people have this like power that they didn't to call out brands for being like, do you stand for what you say you stand for? So it's like, we know like one of our biggest consumers are the LGBTQ community. So we have a lot of messaging that goes behind that, but we also back that up with support for community centers all over the country. We make a lot of donations to LGBTQ groups because we know that like if we slap a pride flag up on our profile picture for the month of June, people are going to call us out for it.
That's what every brand, every other brand's doing.
Right. And I think too, it's like when back in like, I guess it was like June of 2020 with all of the Black Lives Matter protests happening, we were like, I think every brand was like, how do we respond to this? Like, what do we do? You have to figure out how to respond in a meaningful way. And we took a look at like our content and the way that we were representing people of color, queer people, all of those kinds of things that we feel like we've been very inclusive, and that is it's a value for us. And we were like, we can do better. We can carry this strategy throughout the year. We can use, we can work with more influencers in that space. We make sure like our ambassador panel is diverse.
Honestly, that shift was one of the biggest things that came out of COVID, because traditionally for Pride, we, sponsor San Diego Pride, the Oceanside Pride, because Astroglide's located in San Diego. And obviously we've done, things on social and stuff before, but with everything closed down in COVID, we didn't have the opportunity to sponsor any of these in person. And we knew that the LGBTQIA plus community was one of the most heavily impacted during COVID. And so that gave us an opportunity just to like look at our overall program and say, how can we make this more impactful? How can we show our allyship to people across the country? And since restaurants and bars are one of the biggest like safe havens for a lot of LGBTQI plus community members, and that's where they make their chosen families. Those restaurants obviously were closed down. So restaurants and community centers in some markets like LA and New York and Boston were where we spent a lot of our community focus, and it changed our entire Pride program. It's now an award-winning program. We won a couple of awards for that one, and we replicated that this year. We updated it and changed it a little bit, but the community was still at the center, and I think that was a big change that kind of just came in our direction because we were forced to with COVID.
Well, Emily, thank you so much for joining us. And Steph,
Did I get the job?
Yeah, Rex has a run for his money. I don't know, man. So we'll put this in his performance review.
Perfect.
But yes, thank you for joining us on Outsmart. It was so great to have you. So great to be here in person. Really appreciate you coming out to the office.
It was super fun, despite the bright lights and the cameras.
Right, yeah,
I
the
had a great
intimidation
time.
factors.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you.